The insomnia had started 3 months into his residency and never really stopped. He tried everything over the years. Exercise regimes that left him exhausted but still staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Meditation apps that only made him more aware of his racing thoughts. Melatonin in doses that would have sedated a patient pre-surgery, yet somehow left him untouched. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could put other people to sleep with professional precision, but couldn't manage it for himself. At 48, after nearly 2 decades of surgical practice, he'd become a functional insomniac. 3, maybe 4 hours a night. Enough to operate, enough to maintain the steady hands that his reputation depended on. But not enough to feel human. "You look like hell," his colleague said one afternoon in the surgeon's lounge. They just finished a 6-hour spinal fusion, delicate work that required the kind of focus he could only achieve through sheer force of will. "I'm fine." You're not fine. You nearly nicked the dural sac." The voice was low, concerned rather than accusatory. "It's not like you." He said nothing. The truth was, his hands had trembled. Just for a moment. Just enough. His colleague pulled out a phone, scrolled through something. Look, there's a clinical trial at the university hospital. New sleep medication. Still in phase 3, but the results are remarkable. I know someone on that research team. I've tried sleep medication before. Nah, not like this. This is targeting different pathways entirely. GABA B agonist with some kind of novel binding mechanism. A pause. Look, if you need real sleep, actual REM cycles, this is the best option available. He took the contact information, read it twice. The desperation made the decision for him. Within a week, he was enrolled in the trial. Within 2 weeks, he had his first dose. The first night, he took 1 pill at 10 p.m. He woke to sunlight and the peculiar sensation of having been somewhere else entirely. Not the fractured, anxious half-sleep he'd grown accustomed to, but deep, genuine unconsciousness. His wife was already up, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. He felt, for the first time in years, rested. "You slept?" she said when he came downstairs. It wasn't a question. "All night. You didn't even move. I checked on you twice." He kissed her forehead, grateful. "I think this might actually work." The sleep continued, deep, dreamless at first, 8 solid hours that restored something he'd forgotten he'd lost. A few weeks in, the dream started. Not nightmares exactly, just vivid, hyperreal scenarios that felt more like memories than imagination. He was in places he'd never been, doing things that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar. The details were sharp in the moment, but faded quickly upon waking, leaving only impressions. His wife mentioned he'd been talking in his sleep, then walking. First to the bathroom, then wandering the hallway. Once she found him standing at the bedroom window for nearly 20 minutes before he returned to bed. He had no memory of any of it. The medication erased everything between lying down and waking up. "Maybe you should sleep in the other guest room," she suggested. Just until you adjust to the dosage." He agreed. It seemed reasonable. The sleep itself remained perfect, and whatever his unconscious mind did while he slept seemed a reasonable trade for professional competence. About a month in, he had the dream about cooking. He was in a kitchen, though not his own. a professional kitchen with stainless steel surfaces and industrial equipment. His hands moved with confidence, chopping vegetables with practiced precision, timing multiple dishes simultaneously. The dream had the quality of a muscle memory, his body executing techniques he'd never learned while his conscious mind observed from a distance. That afternoon, his wife called him at work.
Hey, did you cook last night?
What?
The kitchen. There's a 3-course meal in the refrigerator. French, I think.
Oh, the medication, he said. I must have been sleepwalking. She was quiet for a moment.
Maybe you should talk to the research team. This seems like more than a side effect.
But the sleep was too good. His hands were steady in the OR again. His focus had returned. He convinced her it was harmless. Told the research team the episodes were minor, and just in nothing. The walking episodes continued and evolved. His wife would find evidence of his nocturnal activities. A reorganized garage, garden beds weeded with surgical precision. Once, an entire bookshelf alphabetized by author and then by publication date. He felt nothing about these reports except a vague academic interest. Sleepwalking was a known side effect. The medication affected the parts of the brain responsible for movement while leaving the conscious mind dormant. His own episodes seemed relatively benign. A few months into the trial, he had the dream about the catalytic converter. It was absurdly vivid. He was part of a crew working at night in a parking lot. He was lying on his back on cold pavement, looking up at the underside of a car. The exhaust system above him, the catalytic converter visible as a cylindrical bulge in the pipe. He had tools in his hands, a reciprocating saw that bucked and vibrated against his palm as he worked. He saw bit into the stubborn cylinder, teeth grinding through metal with a huge whine that he felt in his bones. A fine hot mist sprayed across his face and arms as he cut, smelling of rust and old iron. The smell of motor oil filled his nose. The sound of metal scraping against metal, then the rhythmic vibration of the blade working through the bolts. He felt warm fluid dripping onto his forearms from somewhere above, slick and dark in the dim light. The others were working on different cars nearby. He could hear the sound of their tools, their quiet communication. He was the fastest, the best at the extractions. His hands knew exactly where to cut, how much pressure to apply, the angle that would free the component with minimal damage. The satisfaction when the converter came free was disproportionate to the act. A sense of accomplishment, of having completed something important with perfect technique. He slid out from under the car, the converter in his hands, and then the dream shifted into fragments before dissolving entirely. He woke, feeling unusually well rested. The dream lingered with uncommon clarity, so specific he could still feel the cold pavement against his back, smell the motor oil, hear the saw cutting through metal. He stretched, noting his arms felt stiff. His skin felt strange, tight, waxy, like he'd applied some kind of coating and let it dry overnight. When he looked down, he saw dark stains on his forearms, flaking slightly where his skin had creased during sleep. He stood, walked to the bathroom, noticed the hamper in the corner. Surgical scrubs waited at the bottom. He didn't remember bringing work scrubs home. He pulled them out. They were stiff. The fabric hardened with something dark that had dried into the weave. The smell hit him then. Iron. Copper. He turned on the water. Stepped in. The water ran red. He looked down at his body, his arms, his chest, his face. in the mirror through the glass shower door. Blood. Dried blood in his hair, behind his ears, under his fingernails. Not the small amounts you might get from a nosebleed or a cut. Significant blood. The coverage you'd see after a trauma surgery where containment had failed. He scrubbed himself mechanically, watching the water circle, the drain in pink spirals. His mind refusing to process what he was seeing. Some kind of nosebleed. Sleepwalking incident. Something. He dried off, put on clean clothes. The rational explanations were already forming. The brain doing what it always did when confronted with data that didn't fit. He went to wake up his wife in the master bedroom. The smell hit him before he reached the bedroom. Copper and iron. The distinctive scent of significant blood loss. She was in bed, lying on her back, the blanket pulled up to her shoulders. The blanket was dark, soaked through in places. The fabric clung to her in a way that suggested the mattress beneath was saturated. He approached slowly. He pulled back the blanket. Her body was there, positioned normally, but something about the way she was laying was wrong. The absence of natural resistance, the way her torso seemed to have collapsed slightly into the mattress. He touched her shoulder, cold, rigid. She'd been dead for hours. He pulled her towards him slightly, and that's when he felt it. Her torso moved, but lacked the structural support of bone. She felt hollow. He pulled the blanket down further and saw the careful arrangement. Pillows positioned along her sides. Old towels tucked under her hips and shoulders. Support structures maintaining the shape of her body, preventing it from collapsing inward. Positioning he'd used during a long surgery to maintain patient stability and access. Blood saturated the sheets, but he saw no wounds. He turned her over. The incision ran from her lower thoracic spine down to her sacrum. A posterior approach he'd performed countless times for spinal decompressions and fusions. But this wasn't a careful surgical opening. The edges were rough, torn in places where the cutting had been aggressive rather than precise. The wound gaped open, exposing the cavity where her lumbar spine should have been. He looked at the bed beneath her. There was a hole torn through the mattress, not a clean cut. The foam was shredded, expanded outward by repeated cutting and tearing. Blood had soaked through completely, pulling in the box spring beneath, dripping down onto the floor below. His body moved without conscious direction. He knelt beside the bed, lowered his head to look underneath. The carpet was dark with blood. In the center of the puddle, his surgical kit lay open on a towel that was completely saturated. The tools weren't clean. They were covered in tissue and blood, hastily wiped, but not properly sterilized. Scalpel, retractors, ronter, the reciprocating saw he used for bone cuts, its blade fouled with fragments. Next to the tools, partially wrapped in a bloody surgical drape, was a section of spine, L1 through L5, the lumbar vertebrae extracted as a connected segment. Dissection that required patience and precision. But the bones showed saw marks that were too aggressive, cuts that had gone deeper than necessary. This wasn't the clean work he did in the OR. This was the work of someone operating by muscle memory alone, without the guidance of consciousness or visual confirmation. He remained kneeling there, understanding what the dream had been. He crawled under the bed while she slept above him, reached up through the mattress with his tools, cut through the tissue and muscle of her lower back, sawed through the connecting processes of her vertebrae, extracted her lumbar spine in one section while she bled out above him, the mattress absorbing most of it, though enough had dripped through to cover him completely. He stayed there on his knees, staring at the section of spine lying in its bloody wrapping. Above him, her body lay on the ruined mattress, her lower back open like a textbook illustration. The cavity where her lumbar spine had been, now empty. The morning light came through the window, illuminating the room with ordinary brightness. Somewhere in the house, the coffee maker beeped, having completed its cycle. The world continued its normal progression while he knelt in a pool of his wife's blood, his hand steady as always, staring at the extraction he had no memory of performing.